Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video. Wishing you all good health and peace. The dawn slipped over the mountains, a pale light threading through mist that draped the hills like a whispered vow. Lytuca rose, her breath a faint cloud in the morning's chill. As roosters crowed, their calls sharp against the hush of a world waking. She stepped lightly, her bare feet brushing the cool earth of their bamboo house, and knelt by the hearth. Her hands, worn from years of labor, fed twigs to the fire, coaxing flames that flickered like fragile dreams. A pot of rice porridge simmered, its earthy scent a quiet promise for her daughter Han, who slept under a quilt, her small form curled against the dawn's edge. Tien, her husband, stood by the door, his silhouette dark against the gray light, a sack slung over his shoulder, his eyes heavy with resolve. The day stretched ahead, woven with farewells, yet Lytuca's heart held a stillness, as if waiting for a note yet to sound. Their home teetered on a hillside, its bamboo walls etched with time's patient strokes, a frail haven against the mountain's whims. Each morning Lytuca gathered eggs, fed chickens, or walked the market trail, her steps steady on paths worn smooth by years. Tien tended the garden, his hoe breaking earth for greens, or worked their orange grove, now sold for a promise of 15 million dong, 5 million in hand, the rest a hope tethered to papers and signed. Han, barely 3, trailed them, her laughter a spark as she tossed crumbs to the ducks, her tiny hands eager for the world's wonders. Lytuca watched her, a smile softening her lips, but her eyes carried shadows, memories of lean seasons, of nights when Han's cries pierced a house too quiet, of Tien's absence when his past had caged him. Those years had shaped her, a tree rooted deep yet scarred by storms, her strength a quiet fire beneath her calloused skin. That morning the air was crisp, the hills cloaked in fog. Lytuca moved slowly, her hands sorting eggs, their shells smooth against her palms. Han played nearby, chasing a duckling across the yard, her giggles weaving through the cluck of chickens. Tien packed, his movements deliberate, a shirt, a handful of rice, coins from their last market day. He spoke of the valley, of work to buy a car, to ease their journeys, to lift them from the mountain's grip. A week, maybe 2, he said, his voice low, his gaze fixed on the fire's glow. Enough to make things better, for Han, for you. Lytuca nodded, her throat tight, her fingers tightening around a bowl's edge. She saw his resolve, but also his doubt, hidden in the way his shoulders tensed, as if carrying a load heavier than his sack. Be careful, she said, her voice soft, her eyes searching his. No trouble, Tien. Not like before. He met her gaze, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. I remember, he said, his jaw set. I'll keep clear of those men. Han climbed into her lap, her small hands reaching for an egg, her giggle a fleeting bomb. Lytuca peeled it, her touch gentle, her thoughts far away. She thought of Tien's past. A moment of courage, tackling a thief, earning a bruise and a debt from men who didn't forget. She thought of Han, her daughter's life a fragile sprout, and of herself, holding their world together thread by thread. The mountain was home, its streams, its trails, its stubborn soil, but it was also a cage, its limits pressing harder each year. Tien's journey was a leap, a seed cast on untested ground, and she felt both hope and dread, woven like vines in her chest. He left at sunrise, his sack slung over his shoulder, his steps fading down the path. Lytuca stood at the door, Han in her arms, watching him go. Be good, she called, her voice carrying over the wind. Han waved, her tiny hand a flicker of light. Tien turned, his nod a silent vow, then vanished around the bend, the mountain swallowing his form. The path wound steep, slick with moss, past streams that murmured secrets, past fields where buffalo grazed under a sky heavy with clouds. Lytuca turned back, her hands already moving, eggs to gather, chickens to feed, a day to carry alone. The morning unfolded, the sun climbing, burning off the fog. Lytuca walked the garden, her hoe steady, the earth cool beneath her fingers. Han played, piling pebbles into towers, her chatter a soft rhythm. The fire burned low, its smoke curling like a sigh. Lytuca thought of Tien, his steps on the valley road, his promise to return. She thought of the grove, now another's, its oranges glowing in her memory, a piece of their story traded for hope. She wondered what he'd find, work to lift them or trouble to drag them down. Her heart held a fragile balance, Faith in his strength, fear of the shadows he'd met before. She moved to the market, her basket heavy with greens, Han skipping beside her. The trail wound past a stream, its water clear, reflecting the sky's fleeting blue. At the market voices hummed, vendors calling, coins clinking, the air thick with fish and spice. Lytuca sold her greens, her hands quick, her smile polite but distant. She bought a small fish for Han, a rare treat, and lingered, watching women barter, their laughter sharp, their burdens unspoken. A vendor's whisper caught her ear. Talk of men lurking, of debts unpaid, and her chest tightened, a shadow brushing her calm. She pushed it aside, her steps homeward sure, Han's hand warm in hers. Back home she tended the chickens, their clucks a steady chorus. Han napped, her small form sprawled on a mat, her breath soft. Lytuca sat, shelling corn, her hand steady despite an ache in her bones. The grandmother Milan arrived, her steps slow, her arms open for Han when she woke. They worked together, their silence warm but heavy, the past a shadow that lingered. Milana's eyes held memories of a sin's mistakes, of nights Lytuca had carried alone. Yet today they shared a quiet peace, their hands moving as one, corn husks piling like years endured. Milan hummed a tune from her youth and Lytuca listened, the notes a fragile bridge to moments less fraught. As noon passed, Lytuca walked the ridge, checking traps for pests, her eyes scanning the hills. The air was warm, the earth fragrant with dew and decay. She thought of a sin, his hands hauling bricks, his heart set on a car to carry them forward. She thought of the grove, its sail a wound still fresh, its fruit a memory of seasons shared. She wondered if he walked safely, or if eyes watched him, waiting as they had before. Her steps slowed, her fingers brushing a fern, its fronds soft against her calluses. The mountain held her, but its silence felt heavier today, as if it knew something she didn't. Dusk fell, the sky bruising purple, a crescent moon rising over the hills. Lytuca lit the hearth, the flames casting warmth across the room. She stirred a pot, the fish soup scent mingling with smoke, her thoughts turning inward. She hadn't marked the hours, hadn't counted the moments since a sin left. Her life was a rhythm. Fire, food, Han's laughter, the mountain's embrace. Yet beneath it a question stirred. What waited in the valley, and would it let him return whole? She fed Han, her small hands eager for rice, her chatter a balm, but Lytuca's eyes drifted to the door, her heart poised for a sound. Then it came, footsteps uneven dragging on the path. Lytuca froze, her ladle still, her heart leaping. The door creaked and a sin stumbled in, his face swollen, his shirt torn, blood crusting his lip. Han woke, her eyes wide, her voice a whimper. "Papa," she said, and Lytuca rushed to him, her hands trembling, her breath caught. His sack was gone, his eyes dull with pain, but alive, he was alive. She touched his cheek, her fingers gentle, her voice breaking. "What happened?" she asked, though she feared the answer, her chest tight with a dread she'd known too long. "Men," he said, his voice hoarse, his gaze falling. "From before, the thief's brothers. They found me." Lytuca's heart sank, her hands guiding him to a mat. She fetched water, her movements swift, her mind racing. She saw the bruises blooming purple, the cuts raw under dust. She saw, too, his shame, hidden in the way he looked away, as if he'd failed her again. Han clung to her skirt, her small face pale, and Lytuca knelt, stroking her hair, her voice a whisper. "Papa's home," she said, though her heart pounded with questions unasked. She thought of his courage, once a spark that cost them years, now a flame that drew shadows closer. A sin spoke haltingly of the valley road, a narrow path by a ditch, a sudden ambush, fists and boots that spared no mercy. "They knew me," he said, his voice cracking, "because I stopped their kin. They waited to see." He'd fought, then fled, his breath ragged, his body screaming. A stranger had helped, a man whose face he barely saw, offering aid, urging a hospital. But a sin had refused, driven by fear, not for himself but for them, for the home he'd left unguarded. Lytuca listened, her hands cleaning his wounds, her touch steady despite the storm within. She thought of the grove, sold for dreams now bruised like his skin, and of Han, her daughter's life a fragile thread. Milan rose, her face lined with worry, her hands wringing a cloth. "Foolish boy," she murmured, but her voice held no venom, only grief. She boiled herbs, her movements sure, her silence a prayer. Han curled beside a Sin, her small hand on his, her warmth a tether to the present. Lytuca worked, her hands binding cuts, her heart a tangle of love and dread. She thought of the men who'd struck him, their faces unknown, their anger a debt unpaid. She thought of the valley, its promise soured by vengeance, and of the mountain, their refuge now pierced by fear. She sat by a Sin, his breathing uneven but steady, his eyes closed, pain etched in his brow. She thought of the car he'd dreamed of, its wheels a freedom they couldn't grasp today. She thought of the market, where whispers of trouble had brushed her ears, and of the path, where shadows might linger still. Milan hummed, her voice a thread of comfort, and Han slept, her small form a spark of light. Lytuca's chest ached, her love for them a weight both fierce and fragile. She'd carried this home through worse, hunger, loss, a Sin's absence, but this threat felt different, a darkness with eyes watching, waiting. Night deepened, the moon's glow spilling through the door, touching the bamboo walls, the empty bowl, the mat where a Sin lay. Lytuca stepped outside, the air cool, the stars sharp against the dark. The mountain loomed, its silence vast, the valley hidden beyond its folds. She gazed down the path the Sin had staggered, her heart a fragile bridge between relief and uncertainty. He was home, bruised but breathing, yet the shadows lingered. Men who knew their name, who might tread this path again. She thought of Han, her laughter a light against the dark, and of a Sin, his strength battered but unbroken, his heart set on shielding them. She lingered, the scent of herbs and earth wrapping her, the stream's murmur faint in the distance. The stars held no answers, only light, and Lytuca let the stillness hold her, a breath before dawn's demands. Tomorrow she'd rise, gather eggs, walk the market trail, her steps sure despite the weight. Han would laugh, the chickens would cluck, and life would unfold, patient as the hills. But in her soul a question lingered, delicate as moonlight. Who would guard their home if the shadows returned, and could their love withstand the cost? Somewhere in the valley's hum, danger waited, and here on the mountain her family breathed, a fragile circle of hope and risk, its edges fraying under a sky too vast to promise peace.